Welcome to The Founder's Mind. This is your host, Adam Muchler. On this episode, I have Merav, co-founder and CEO of Data Society. Learn how Merav went from being a K-12 teacher to starting a data science education company. Listen and learn through some of the lessons Merav has worked through along the way and where she sees data science heading in the future. Well, thanks for being on the show. I'm excited to have you and try and do a little bit of due diligence, but I'd love to hear from you sort of a little bit about Data Society and what you're building and what got you into it.
Yes. So Data Society, in a nutshell, provides tailored data science training programs to companies and organizations to help them become more data-driven and to leverage their data more efficiently. That's a long sentence. It's always a fun challenge when I'm introducing my company to somebody new. But in essence, we are really good at breaking down complex data science methods into simple step-by-step guides so that people can actually implement them at the analyst level. And then you also have, we do a lot of work with executives to help them better understand how to run a team and build a data strategy and build their data infrastructure. So what we found is that when we give executives and managers that empowerment to understand how data science works, they're much more excited to then implement data strategies across an organization.
I mean, that seems reasonable to me. I'm sure it's a little bit different when you're on the selling side of the equation.
It is, because data science can be applied so many different ways. And a lot of clients who we work with have these BI tools, these dashboards that they have purchased for millions of dollars, and then are frankly relegated into a dusty corner where maybe a few people use them out of an entire company. And then they are wondering, what we're doing wrong. And what we do tell our clients is that it's not an either or situation. So it's not buying a tool or investing in training, but it really is a combination.
Sure.
We have no problem with any of the tools that have come out. We're talking about Tableau and talking about Watson and Microsoft BI and all of these tools. But if you have somebody on the other end who doesn't understand what a regression model does, or doesn't understand how to check assumptions for a random forest model, then whatever information you get out of there, it's not going to be valuable to you. So it's really being able to understand what data science does and having the framework to ask the right questions.
I really like that perspective, the framework to ask the right questions. It's something that in the coaching space, I think about a lot. You don't have to be an expert on everything, but being able to ask the right questions at the right time, or knowing what the conversation is, having enough information so you're not just nodding and saying yes, but not understanding at all.
So it is really interesting because we do a lot of work with clients, so we do training, and then we also do take on some consulting projects. And I remember we work with a marketing firm, an email marketing firm, and they send out millions of emails every month, very high volume, real big data. And they asked us what are some of the changes they can make to their emails so that people will open them. And we said, okay, that's a decent question. Let's take a look at the data that you've gathered. And what we saw is that it was actually really hard for us to make that initial assessment, because we saw that all of their emails were being sent out at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. So if that's when all the emails are being sent out, I can't compare that open rate to an open rate on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning. And one of the aspects of data analysis that we really emphasize is the fact that collecting data and cleaning data is going to be your most intensive stage. Typically it takes 60 to 70% of any data science project time, because you're not sure if you have the data that you need. Collecting it takes time. And if your data is not standardized or you're missing certain pieces, then that takes a really long time too. So we have a lot of data scientists who, I like to call them our frustrated data scientists, because they're trying to explain to their managers, like, hey, this analysis is going to take another 2 weeks because I have to clean all of this data. And the manager is frustrated with them because they're saying, why does it take you this long to clean an Excel spreadsheet, right? And so helping to bridge those communication gaps is also like a really big part of the solution that we bring to a lot of companies.
What got you, how did you go down this path with this, with this focus, with this company, with this topic? I mean, what was the trigger?
The trigger was, I wanted to make a bigger impact than what I was currently doing. So a bit about my background. I am a teacher by trade. So I've been a teacher in public schools. I was a special education teacher up in New York City for a while. And I've also done a lot of one-on-one and adult learning and assessment training. So really the entire spectrum of education. And I was working for an educational nonprofit at the time, and it was a really good job. But I was thinking about what my next move could be, what my next steps could be. And that's when serendipity really stepped in, because my mutual friend, who's my co-founder, I knew him through a mutual friend of ours, and I had heard that he was thinking about starting a new company and that data science and was going to be a thing. And mind you, this was in 2014 when nobody really understood what data science was. It wasn't the sexiest anything. It was just, a weird term that nerds used. And so, I heard about this nugget of an idea, and I met with my co-founder and I said, listen, I'm really good at teaching people anything, right? It doesn't matter what the topic is. Mm-hmm. This is a topic that I would be able to teach, and I could help you put together the best training for this topic. And, he said, okay. So I started coming in after work on the weekends. I would take days off to go to business meetings. I was essentially, don't tell my boss.
Don't tell.
I was working like 2.5 jobs, I like to say, for about 9 months. And my heart was just in it, from the minute we started building it and designing it. And I love solving problems mm-hmm. and solving challenges. Yeah. So I helped build our online learning management system from scratch, and help design what a curriculum could look like and what are the key assessment pieces that need to be into place to make sure people are actually learning and staying engaged. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the problem solving. I fell in love with data science. It's a really amazing field. I learned how to program, which
pretty amazing.
It's so much fun. I feel like I'm in Hackers, which is quite a throwback. It's not as, the graphics aren't as cheesy, but it is still very fun. And so I quit my job about 9 months after we started the company, to move into it full time, and never looked back in 4 years.
Yeah, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, as they say.
There's still a company. It's clearly growing. I mean, just if I look at it from a real estate perspective and the amount of desks that you have at WeWork and the offices now.
Yeah.
What do you feel like that inflection point was when you said, okay, I'm going to commit. I don't want to say full time because you were already working 2.5 full-time jobs, but when you say like, I'm going to commit, I'm going all in on this and I'm removing the other elements of my work.
Yeah. I remember that moment actually really clearly, because I asked myself a simple question, which is, where is my time most valuable? And that was a tipping point. I realized that my time was really much more valuable starting this nugget of a company and seeing what we would do. I think for me, it didn't seem like a risk, because there was so much that I would be able to learn from building a company from the ground up, that if the worst thing happened, which is if we had to fold for whatever reason, I would be able to transfer my skills into a different position. It would still have a really big impact. So, that's really how I saw it. And the other piece of it was, if I don't try as hard as I can to make it work, then if we fail, I'll never know if we could have succeeded if I had tried harder.
For sure.
And so at least with this, I was like, I'm going to put everything into it. I had this amazing vacation planned. I ended up having to cancel, which was really tough. I still owe my little sister a trip to Japan, as she reminds me on a regular basis. So I did, because I said, okay, if I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit. And I have to make sure that I look back and know that I did everything that I could to make it succeed.
What's a challenge that sticks out in this journey so far? I'm sure there's been many, but what's a challenge that kind of sticks out that you had to work through?
I'd say one of the biggest challenges that we have now is actually what you alluded to earlier, which is allocating our most precious resource, which is time. Time is something you can never, ever, ever get back. It's just, you can always make more money, but you can't make more time.
Yeah.
Not yet anyways. So as we grow, we have to figure out where our time is used most effectively, to continue to grow our company, to continue to grow our business lines. And so that's a lot of what we're working on right now is allocating our time in the most effective way possible. It's a challenge, we still work on that on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's a process. Any tips, tricks, learnings that you've kind of picked up in this focus?
Define your goals very clearly, I would say, is a really important one. And make sure you evaluate yourself regularly, right? Because it's important, there's, of course, this thing in startup land where you have to fail fast. And so a big part of that is you don't want to invest too much time going down a road that is not going to be successful for you. So you have to be able to take a step back, evaluate, and then change course without being so stubborn about it. We say that we're wrong all the time in different capacities. That this is one of those, if I think like, hey, I think there's a market here, and I do my research and I go after it, and we do some marketing campaigns, we realize, hey, there isn't, or there's not as big of a response as we had wanted. We need to either adjust that and try again, or we're seeing this other opportunity that's right here. It's low-hanging fruit. And this is where our time is better spent, then we can pivot to go to that market. So it's really being able to evaluate that and move forward.
Evaluate and move forward. I like it. What's a piece of advice you've received as a founder that you found really impactful?
Piece of advice. Taking care of yourself. I know that might be a little cliche.
It's not cliche if it's real.
It's not cliche if it's real. That's right. The truth is, if you're not, burnout is very real. It's very real. And if you are not mindful of it, then it will catch up to you real quick. I'll also say that I love Amazon's leadership principles. I don't know if you've seen them. They're the 14 leadership principles that Amazon designed. And when I read them, I thought, well, why am I reinventing the wheel? These guys have probably put a lot of thought into it. And it really gives a good overview of what makes a good leader. And it talks about things like to stand firm in your beliefs, to like not be afraid to fail, to try again. I have all of them in our other office actually up there, so don't quote me as we're recording. But it's as we grow and as we have more team members, like my responsibilities, especially as a leader, really shift. And so now it's important for me to be more mindful as well about how I'm managing the team, and also the direction that we're heading in, and the example that I'm setting. So all of that is in my head.
Love it. That's a lot to hold.
Yeah.
What's I've got a whole arsenal of questions, and your answers are coming out so succinct. I love it. It's really good. What's something that you know now that you would have appreciated knowing at the beginning of your journey?
Take time to learn things better, I would say. I think one of the biggest challenges that we had when we first started is that I just wasn't as familiar with the field of data science as I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mistakenly thought that, only somebody with a master's or a PhD could grasp it. We've proven that to be wrong. We've been able to teach data analytics methods to people who have been front desk assistants at legal firms, and who just really took to it. So, and the reason why I say that is because it was harder for me to evaluate who we needed on our team early on, because I didn't understand the methodologies that we needed to focus on. And so had I had a better grasp about that, I think I would have made a few different decisions about how we started with that content creation process, which has been through several iterations.
Sure. There are always lessons along the way, and I've had many. So
yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, it's funny. Talking to other founders and other entrepreneurs is always so helpful, because we're seeing the same problems. It's the same problems everywhere. And, we bootstrapped our company because we wanted to have the flexibility to pivot to where the market was and retain control of the company. And so sometimes I joke, like, if we'd had $1 million to start with, I just think we'd be $1 million in the hole.
Yeah.
I don't think we would be that much farther along, because we had to learn so much about the process of creating the materials and making them robust and making them stand out. And that's just, it takes time more than anything else.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. And people talk about bootstrapping or raising money also, and there are pros and cons, and sometimes it's necessary. It depends on what you're building.
Absolutely.
But no, I mean, it's interesting to hear that from Data Society's perspective.
Yeah. And, I think we do get approached by a lot of VCs and investors, now that we've been around the block for a while, we've proven ourselves. And we still have these conversations. Does it make sense to raise money now that we know what our market is, what we're going after? So, we'll see. I don't know the future, but
TBD.
If there comes a time when it makes sense for us strategically, TBD, then, that's something we'll consider.
Yeah, I think there's also this element of being in the moment, and not being so in the moment that you don't obviously see what's coming, but not thinking so far ahead that you sort of trip up in what's right in front of you. So like that VC money is out there,
yes,
and not getting twisted and feeling like it's the only way.
Yeah. And it's funny, because there was a little while where I was thinking, like, okay, we're hiring more people. Okay, like, we need to get everything in place now for like a bigger company, so we're ready, and this and this. And what ended up happening is, like, you're spending a lot of time on things that don't need to be built yet. And we do have some really great processes in place, but that they're right for our size and they're right for us to scale. So this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach for building out your internal capabilities. I think you really have to be mindful of, like, what your needs are, what your needs will be in 6 months and a year, versus like also what your needs will be next week, and what business you have coming in.
For sure. Focus. Who's a founder that you admire, and why?
A founder that I admire and why? I really like Sarah Blakely. She founded Spanx. She has a very, just like a can-do story, right? Like, she candidly admits she knew nothing about nothing. And she really had a lot of grit and fought really hard to produce her product and then to place it. And then she spent time like literally next to her product in, I think it was like Nordstrom's or Lord & Taylor, like trying to sell it to customers who are coming in. And so she really built that company from the ground up, just with this vision and this determination.
Yeah.
That's what I really admire.
Her name comes up fairly frequently with when that question comes up, which I appreciate. Because there also aren't a lot of examples that are discussed at great length of women who have founded and built companies and have had a lot of success, mostly because it's harder to, and not because they're making it harder, but because society and business is making it harder. So it's even more impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's true. Like, she's the first person that comes to mind because I've seen her speak, and she was, I think, the first episode of How I Built This, which I know is a really popular podcast. So that makes sense. I also really like Mike Bloomberg, and I saw him speak about how he got started, and it was really interesting. I think he built the software, accounting software, and I'm totally going to bungle this because it's been a while since I've heard the story, but what he ended up doing is he made friends with everybody in, was like the Fannie Mae office. He would bring coffee to them every day and have conversations with them every day. And then when he was in a meeting trying to sell his software for a trial, he's sitting across this guy, and he wasn't being very receptive and saying things like, well, we'll see what happens, and we kind of already have this software. And then all of a sudden, this guy's boss passes by and looks in and says, oh, hey, Mike, like, how's it going? And, Bloomberg is sitting there trying to sell products. Oh, yeah, I'm just pitching the product, that I was telling you about. And this, like, VP goes, okay, yeah, sounds great. Like, let's try it out. And I was like, that's how he made his first big sale, right? Is through building that type of relationship and having that type of determination. I thought that was really funny.
That it's such a great point, and it's something that I say a lot, and I believe, and this is how I operate, which is relationships precede results.
120%. I agree with that.
Yeah, and if you focus on that, your outcomes are very different. Yeah,
like, I will say that it helps that we did build up a really nice community, a really good community. In data science, and we offered a lot of help for free. A lot of people were asking us questions about how do I implement this in data and that in data, and we would sit there and we would help them out, and then they would refer us to clients who were looking for trainings. So referrals are huge. And conversely, I don't know how family friendly the show is, but like, just don't be an asshole. I've also met some founders who really did not make a good impression.
Yeah.
And it made me a lot less likely to want to work with them in the future.
Sure. First, I think I would say that this show is probably occasionally PG-13, but mostly PG. But I think that,
we can bleep that out later.
I think that's a really great point. And it's been said by many, many greater people before me about, this, like, takes a lifetime to build up a reputation and a day to ruin it idea. And it, for me, I always think it takes a lot of energy to do what's right and to be good, but that's the point. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't mean be a pushover, right? It doesn't mean that I'm going to do 100 hours of work for free. You have to know your limits, but it just means, like, just be helpful to people around you. There's no reason why you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And if you can't be helpful, just say, like, hey, like, I'm really sorry, I'm swamped and I can't help you, but maybe here's a few other resources that you can look at.
Totally.
Things like that.
What's something that you've learned recently that blew your mind?
What's something that blew my mind recently? That's a good question. I was actually looking at WeWork's pitch deck recently to investors. It was leaked a few years ago. And what blew my mind is that they had estimated growth of their WeLive enterprise. I don't know if you know of WeLive.
Yeah.
It's like kind of dorm room style living. And I think they estimated there to be over 200 locations or 100 locations worldwide. I'm pretty sure they just have the two.
Yeah.
That they originally started with. And I guess the reason why it was surprising to me is because you do have very successful companies who still, they do get it wrong on occasion. And it's always a good reminder to me, like everybody grows and everybody fails and everybody learns, right? Like, and I know that they have been very successful in a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. This just happens to be that one aspect where, like, hey, maybe it didn't work out so much. So that's a good reminder.
Yeah. And it's just the example that's pseudopublic, right? Like,
yeah,
there are plenty more that are probably more embarrassing that we'll never hear about.
Oh, a ton. A ton for sure. So that was a good reminder, and just interesting to think of like how other founders see their companies growing and that trajectory, and how they adjust it.
Well, we don't have to dig into it too much, especially because we weren't part of that conversation with WeWork specifically. But, there's also this culture of things need to be huge to be worth it.
Yeah.
And like with, especially in VC and, I know that they're not in Silicon Valley, but Silicon Valley, all those things, it's like, we're going to take over the world and, write me a huge
We're the Uber of X.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, we're the next Uber of X.
And it's hard to say if that's a great reference yet, by the way. Like, TBD.
Maybe it's going to be the Lyft.
Yeah, who knows?
The next Lyft of X. And that is also like a really good point. Really thinking through what success means. And whether we'll ever feel successful, like there are in some ways where I do feel successful. Like, hey, I've kept a company afloat for 4 years. Like, we have a team of employees that's already quite a small percentage of companies, across the US. But then what does it mean to be successful when we reach 20 million in revenue? Mm-hmm. Like, if we sell for like 100 million, is that success? Or when we get X number of clients? I've started to think also a lot more about like what's success to me. Like, what happens if I lose everything tomorrow, right? Like, what do I still have? What can I still do? And so that's also like a really interesting aspect to think about, especially as a founder, because if you have VC, I know that success is defined a little bit more by them, by your investors. But also, like, at some point you can't push anymore. So like, at what point do you say, like, I'm successful, and I'm going to keep pushing, but also like, what else can I do? And what are my other goals? So
that's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. I'm convinced I can do it in less, but we'll see.
Merav, this has been really good. That is the extent of my inquiry with questions. I really appreciate having you on the show and getting to sort of learn a little bit more from your perspective about the entrepreneurial experience. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And I think the last thing is, where do people find you on the interwebs? How do they follow along with your company? Are you pointing people in a certain direction? What's the best way to keep up?
Yes. Well, I can give my bank account number if they just want to direct deposit into my account.
And a social security number.
And social security, of course. So you can find us at datasociety.com. And we do have online courses that people can start for free to just learn a little bit more about data science and how to start programming on their own. We do, most of our business right now is in B2B. So we work with a lot of government agencies, defense contractors. If you're out there and you want your team to learn more about how to use data science, you can reach out to me at Merav, MERAV, as in Victor, at datasociety.com, or you can fill out a form also on our site and we'll contact you. If you want to follow me, I'm not very often on the Twitters, but I am at Merav Yurav. I think that's my Twitter handle. And then I'm also on Instagram at myurav, and also follow Data Society on Instagram because we are there. So you can find us there as well. So follow us everywhere and email me if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back next week to learn all about Mandela Dixon and her company Founder Gym, an online training center for underrepresented founders who want to build successful tech startups. In just 10 months, Founder Gym has had 6 cohorts with 170 founders from 9 countries who have gone through the program and already raised over $20 million in capital. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. Last but not least, thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make The Founder's Mind possible. Until next time, take care.
In the world, going through all of this insanity and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn, what you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, Founder's Mind is what you see.